Welcome to Empowered by AI. I'm Michelle Muncy-Silva. This podcast is for women building what's next and using AI with intention. In Season 6, you'll hear from founders, educators, creatives, and builders who are actually using AI to think better, work smarter, and move with intention. We're learning from conversations about readiness, literacy, and taking action, because every episode gives you ideas you can use immediately. Let's get into it. All right, Katie, I am so glad to have you with us today. I cannot wait for everyone to meet you. Would you introduce yourself to everybody?
Yes, I'd love to. I'm excited to be here as well. I'm Katie Milton Jordan. I am the founder of the AI Performance School for Economic Developers. We can be found at simpleedo.ai. And yes, I help economic developers learn to use AI so that they can operationalize the important work that they are doing in our communities.
And what do you find that they tend to get wrong about AI when you're working with them? What are your discoveries?
That's a really good question. I don't feel like they necessarily get it's not that they get something wrong, but from the experiences that I've had working with economic developers, it's almost like they don't know what they don't know. And that becomes their biggest stumbling block. And I think that's pretty common across a variety of industries. So it does take having a few conversations and giving some demos to the executive leadership team before they finally get it. And they're like, whoa, you can do that? And then they end up becoming a convert. But I do find that there's a lot of organizations, economic development organizations included as well, where there's a lot of hype in the news that is causing people to have FOMO around, okay, do we have AI in our organization yet? And I think that it's easy for a lot of these leaders when they're feeling pressured to make a decision to just grab whatever low-hanging AI fruit is available so that they can report to their stakeholders, yeah, we have AI. And I think that sometimes that can be a stumbling block. And it's actually directly related to something that you and I had exchanged a few notes about prior to our interview, has to do with, I believe that there are three different buckets or categories, if you will, that an organization can choose to invest in AI in. And ideally, an organization would choose to invest in all three of these buckets, but the sequence, timing, and pace of how they invest in these buckets is important. So the three buckets are products, projects, and people processes is the third bucket. So an example of an AI product would be in economic development. We have specialized economic development software that reports data and metrics, and lots of organizations will pay for an annual subscription to access this data and this software that's powered by AI. So that's an example of a product that you could buy. The next example is a project. So there's lots of organizations that think chatbots are going to solve all their problems. So we need a chatbot. We need to delegate whatever this is to a chatbot or this little robot thing that they think is going to be a magic silver bullet. So that's an example of a project, because in a project like that, you would typically bring in an engineer to code and create the thing, and then it would be working with your web developer to connect it to what you're doing, and so on and so forth. And then the last bucket is what I refer to as people and processes. And this is the one that, in my experience, I feel like leaders think of last, when really, if I could encourage them, I'd like them to invest in that bucket first. Because once you, number one, educate your people on, how to use AI fluency, what's possible with AI, you're going to be able to make better decisions when it comes to the products and the projects. So I find that it typically goes in that order. Many organizations will invest in the product, then the project, and then finally, when they're like, we're not getting any ROI on this, then they'll invest in the people and the processes.
Yes, and I have found that to be true across multiple industries. I don't know why, but it seems to be human nature. That first step was, oh, I'm gonna get a product that'll fix that. Is it the desire for an easy, quick fix? Or is it maybe the not understanding of the intensity of this shift? What do you think it is that makes people do that? Because I see it so prevalently.
Yeah, I do too, and I agree. And I think it's a little bit of both. Number one, humans and especially leaders who are in an executive role, they have a lot of responsibilities, they have a lot of obligations. They're already at spread too thin. And so for them to say, oh my gosh, I now need to like stop everything to pay attention to this new hype thing. So, number one, I think it's difficult for leaders to be intentional about making the bandwidth. And the next thing is that there's been so many hype things that have come out. Every year there's a new hype thing. And so I think it's easy to look at this AI thing and think that somebody's crying wolf instead of recognizing it for what it really is. And those folks, yeah, they just have limited bandwidth and they're like, is this really a thing I need to pay attention to?
But on the flip side of that, I had a chance to look at your Venture Fest story. That was so powerful. I watched the YouTube video.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it.
Oh my God, especially the way the youth-centered programming, it just ignited the whole community. So I'm wondering, what did that experience teach you about the intersection of AI and economic development, and then just the potential that just radiated out of those students' ideas?
Yeah, that I'm very proud of that accomplishment and that event. That was a lot of fun. And so I get really excited when I have an opportunity to talk about that kind of stuff. But what I feel like one of the big things that project proved to me is that when you partner with AI, you can get so much more done. Literally, we had nothing. We had literally nothing 6 weeks before the event was to go off, and it was me and AI. And we created the event, we coordinated the event, we brought in all of our sponsors for the event, we brought in all of our stakeholders for the event, and we did it with virtually no budget, no time, and it was still an incredible success. So to me, that's just proof, especially for economic development leaders that are in rural areas or they have a very small team and they're under-resourced. Partnering with AI is going to amplify what you're already doing well.
Yeah, it was beautiful to watch. I think we're going to have to put a link to that in the show notes, because that touched my heart. And the fact that they were all pushing towards entrepreneurial ventures was so timely.
Yes.
I think that a lot of solo entrepreneurs right now, women that are reinventing themselves, moving from, say, a corporate structure to a more entrepreneurial role, are looking at how they can capitalize on AI, because they are moving forward as a solo individual. And I know one of your core philosophies is AI as copilot, right? You're not the driver, but the co-constructor with you. What does that look like inside economic development, or for someone that's really under pressure to adopt faster and move farther?
Yeah, and we hear human in the loop a lot, but yeah, it really is about the human being the driver and AI being the co-pilot. And I actually adopted this saying from, I think it was a female therapist who was saying like, hey, listen, ladies, as women, it's cool that we've got our emotions. Like, we don't shove them in the trunk. We don't let them drive the car, but we invite them to sit next to us, right? And so that's where the idea came from. And so I feel the same way about AI. And it's about using AI as a tool so you can unlock your potential and you can unlock the human flourishing instead of trying to be spread so thin. And yeah, in economic development, it's all about that. When I was in my practitioner role in my last community, we had a 2-person economic development organization and limited funding. And we were expected to 10x our output on half the budget. And so we were constantly just running ragged and getting burnt out all the time. And in economic development, one of our biggest priorities is relationships with our stakeholders, with our board, with our community partners, with the executive leaders of the projects that we recruit. And that's one thing that AI can't duplicate, it can't replicate, it can't do it the way that a human can. And so I think that AI is especially powerful for people in economic development because when it reduces that operational burden, those administrative tasks, you can invest time in those things that only humans can do, building relationships.
And I think, too, we have to talk about alignment because it's one thing to see your vision. It's another thing to be able to execute it. So what do you see as the cost of misalignment? How can leaders rebuild clarity when everything seems like it's got to be faster, better, stronger? There's a little bit of chaos around all of this.
Yeah. And I feel like it's a double-edged sword. And this is actually a challenge that I've been rolling around in my head as well. The cost of misalignment, number one, with AI, now you're just going 10 times faster in the wrong direction. When you come full circle, you're able to now fail faster and iterate faster and learn faster. So for me, like when I look back just on the last couple of years that I've been working with AI and practicing, like my iterations and my feedback loops have gotten so tight that I've probably failed more in the last couple of years partnering with AI than ever before, but I've also won more. I've also succeeded more because that feedback loop is tighter and we're able to iterate faster. So I think that the piece of advice that I would give to folks who are going in that circle being like, gosh, does it ever end? Is to remember to be intentional about where are you headed. And now I think that it's more important than ever for us to be checking in with our internal compass or whatever it is that brings us back to our center or the center that we're aiming for.
And I know so many times we struggle to put ourselves first, right? Because there's every hat that we're putting on. We've got work. We're possibly reinventing ourselves and coming into a new role. We're learning AI on our own time on the fly. And you've admitted as well that you struggled to implement some of your own strategies. So what mindset shift or workflow, if you will, finally helped you stop putting yourself last?
Yeah, the mindset shift, I would say that this is one thing that was definitely not related to AI at all.
Yeah.
In the last 5 years, I went through some significant personal loss and reached out to some professionals and began addressing my nervous system healing. And so that has been a top priority to me. And so I've created some boundaries and some ways to gently hold myself accountable to my best life, to the human that I want to be. And so what that awareness has been able to allow me to do is I'll now notice when I start going down a rabbit hole with AI, which is super easy to do. And then I can remind myself, oh, hey, you know what? It's time for you to go outside and look at the horizon. It's time for you to go take a walk. It's time for you to drink some water. It's time for you to stretch. So for me, that has been about getting more in touch with my nervous system and my somatic healing and understanding my body signals when it's saying, hey, it's time for you to step away and do something else now.
And that's so important. I think we have to recognize the whole woman is coming to the table while we're creating these new things for ourselves. We can't leave ourselves behind.
Exactly.
That's so important.
Exactly.
I am really looking forward to letting you take the screen because you're teaching leaders right now to build personal AI leadership policies and AI-enabled 90-day execution workflows. I'm hopeful that you are willing to walk us through maybe one simple prompt that you use right here live that our audience can try as soon as they tune in to get that first draft plan, maybe a decision framework or some kind of clarity. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm excited to do that too. And I want to give a hat tip to you and Anne, because at the recent virtual conference that you had for She Leads AI was when I was first introduced to the idea of a personal AI policy. And I do AI policy workshops for my economic development clients a lot because it's important that the leadership team says, okay, here's your guardrails, these are your boundaries, this is how we're using AI, and so on and so forth. And it's simple, but it's not obvious. And I just never thought, what's my personal AI policy? And I think that we're moving into a leadership era where it will be incredibly important for all leaders to know what are their red lines when it comes to AI. So I created a workflow inspired by that I'm happy to share with you and the audience this evening.
So you should be able to share your screen. If you
Okay.
want. We're going to encourage everyone to go over to YouTube. No looking at the phone if you're listening to this on your phone. No looking at the phone while driving. That's not fair.
Yeah, don't do
If you
that.
guys over to YouTube, do it safely.
Yeah, just listen along. I'm going to go ahead and hit share and bring you guys onto my desktop here.
Perfect.
So here is the workflow. And if you don't mind, I'll just share a little bit of education as we go through this. If you're looking at this workflow, you can see that this is just over 6 pages long. So one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, what's the difference between a workflow and a prompt or a long prompt? One of the differences in my experience is that a workflow is quite a bit longer than a long prompt. And a workflow actually has different steps that we go through step by step. So you can see in this workflow, the AI first is going to be instructed to introduce itself to us as a guided reflection coach. And in the beginning, the AI is also going to be instructed to ask if the user wants a short introduction. Do they want some context or education around what we're going to be doing in this workflow? So it says, do you want an overview of the reflection prompts, or do you just want to jump in, right? But we have step 1. We have step 2. I should probably read these for people who are listening. Step 1, we're going to go through my AI red lines. Step 2, we're going to identify my client commitment. Step 3, we're going to identify my quality standard. Step 4, my bias check. Step 5, my stance on workforce impact. Step 6, my societal responsibility. Step 7, choose the policy format. Step 8, generate the final one-pager. And step 9, ending the session. And step 10, final consideration. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this whole thing. All of our workflows are LLM agnostic. So folks are welcome to use whatever LLM they prefer. I'm going to paste it into Gemini this evening. But what I'm also going to do is I am going to remove this header stuff that is not necessary because we don't want to accidentally confuse the AI, and remove this bottom stuff right here. And you can see that I've also instructed the AI to run this step by step. Now I am on fast, not on thinking, because we are just trying to run through this as an illustration. Once your listeners have access to this prompt, they can take extra time with it if they want. Okay. So it introduces itself to us as the guided reflection coach. We're going to draft our personal AI policy, which is a foundational document for values-aligned AI use. It tells us about our tone. It tells us a little bit about what is an AI policy. So a personal AI policy is a clear, self-defined code of conduct. It outlines your boundaries, ethical commitments, and quality standards for using AI tools in your professional life. It's a proactive commitment to integrity. It talks a little bit about how it differs from a company policy and why it matters for values-aligned AI use. And then it shows, here are the 6 key areas that we're going to walk through together. And those are the 6 key areas that I just read to everybody on the screen. Then it says, do you want to begin, or do you want an example of a personal AI policy first? I'm just going to say, go ahead and begin. So now what we do is we just interact with AI until we get all the way through the workflow. And when we're through the workflow, then we have the final output. So what are your AI red lines? And it says, what are 1 to 3 things you will never use AI for in your professional life? And then it says, if you'd like examples, please just ask. And I'm going to go ahead and say examples, because when I first heard of this concept, it was hard for me to think of, what wouldn't I use AI for? Like, I use it pretty liberally.
Okay.
And I
All right.
wasn't really aware of ways that people are abusing AI. So I ask it for some examples here: original content integrity, confidentiality and privacy, legal and ethical judgment, right? And for these things are all applicable to the way that I want to use AI. And these are some red lines. So I'm going to say include all of the above. So we're going to include all of the above in my personal AI policy.
Okay.
So here's a summary of my AI red lines. And if this is accurate, you confirm and proceed. Okay, my client commitments. And again, if you ask for examples, I will provide them. So it says, how do you define your one sentence communication to clients or colleagues, ensuring transparency and trust? What is one sentence you will use to explain how you use AI? So again, I'm going to ask for an example. And folks don't need to ask for an example. If you have your one sentence ready, just go ahead and use it. But again, I like all of these. Transparency focus. I use AI tools to accelerate research and draft initial outlines, but every final deliverable is personally reviewed, edited, and approved by me, which is true. And that's another example of AI being the co-pilot and not the driver. Integrity focus. My commitment to you is that AI serves as an assistant for efficiency, but all strategic insights, critical judgment in our work are entirely human-led and human-validated. And conciseness focus. AI is used strictly for data processing and summarizing. Content recommendations and strategic choices originate with and are vetted by me. And I want to say include all of the above. I'm actually a proponent of, in work settings, at the bottom of an AI generated output, having the individual who signed off on it put their name on the bottom of the paper. I would advocate for that because I think that it's going to cause us as humans to look closer.
Yeah, if you're putting your
something
name
out
to
the
this,
door.
you're agreeing with it. Exactly.
Yeah. So here's a summary of my client commitments, and I will say yes and proceed. My quality standard. Again, I'm going to ask for examples from our quality standard. It says, what's your personal process for checking AI generated work before sharing it? If AI makes a mistake, what's your promise to clients or colleagues? So I asked for examples, and it gives a suggestion: fact checking and source verification. I will treat all AI generated facts, statistics, and citations as verified. Manually check them against primary or authoritative sources. I will always ensure the tone and professional voice match my own and align with the client's context. Yep. Include that.
Definitely going to need to verify and triple check.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So if AI makes a mistake, what's your promise to clients or colleagues? My promise is transparency and making it right. Okay, so here's a summary. A review process, mistake promise, you promise to clients or colleagues, full transparency regarding the error, and a commitment to making it right. Correcting the work immediately, waiving the fee for the affected portion, or prioritizing its fix. Exactly. So exactly, proceed. My bias check. Now, I actually ran this prompt earlier today before I came on the show, because I wanted to make sure that there was nothing broken. So that was part of my triple check.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had to ask AI for some information on the bias check, because of course, all humans, we don't think we're biased, and that's the danger of bias, right? So it says, what's one action you will take to spot and challenge bias in your work and your client systems? And I'll say, give examples. Okay. Because how can we spot bias if we don't know what it looks like? So here are a few examples of actions you could take to proactively check for and change bias. So prompt engineering, I always ask AI to critique its own output for assumptions, stereotypes, and underrepresented perspectives. And this is pulling on memories from earlier today, because that's exactly what I asked it to do. When I ran this prompt earlier today, I said, okay, give me a prompt that I can save in my prompt library, that whenever I'm getting ready to deliver an output, I can run this prompt for a bias check.
Okay.
Data source review, I will actively review the data sources or training models behind, and outlier testing. I will run my AI-generated content through a stress test by applying it to a diverse range of fictional client scenarios. So what I'm going to do for this, okay, create a prompt that will accomplish this outcome with all of my final deliverables. Okay. And I can do the same thing with outlier testing if I want to run it through outlier testing. So here's a summary of your bias check action. It didn't give me the prompt. So I'm going to ask it again. Can you give me a prompt that I can use to check my final personal AI policy against once complete? See if we can get the AI back on the rails. Okay. Well, I'm not happy with this particular output because it looks like it's just reiterating what I've already asked it to do. But let's try this step at the end and see if it works better, because I may be confusing the AI trying to do this in the middle of an established workflow prompt. So I'm going to tell it to move on to step 5, my stance on workforce impact, responsibility to people. And again, I'm going to ask for an example. Reskilling focus. My responsibility is to ensure that any tasks automated by AI are replaced by higher value human-centric work. I commit to providing my team or collaborators with opportunities for reskilling, transparency in planning, and ethical sourcing. I commit to prioritizing the use of AI to augment human work, not to replace it. And that's probably my main points. I think that reskilling and focus and transparency and planning are also important. But again, with AI as a copilot, I believe that AI can augment what we're doing as humans. It doesn't need to replace them. For example, you can keep the same amount of staff and 2 to 10x your output for the same amount of payroll. So I'm not a big proponent of cutting jobs for AI use. I'm a proponent of doubling or more output. So here's a summary of your stance on workforce. Does this capture your stance accurately? I'll say yes and proceed. My societal responsibility. This I had to ask for examples too. It says, how will you evaluate whether your AI work could be used for harmful purposes? And again, I'd like to think that's just not the essence of who I am, so I wouldn't think of it. I'm like, you're going to have to give me an example of how I'd be doing that. So I will evaluate my work by asking if this tool or content were scaled up by a bad actor. Could it cause widespread societal damage? I will not proceed if the answer is yes. My red line is any work intended or likely to be used for the purposes of political disinformation, creation of deepfake evidence, development of autonomous weapons or surveillance systems.
Yes. Wow.
Yes, we do not want to do any of the above. Include those in the policies. And again, when your listeners have a chance to spend more time with this tool, they can examine these reflection prompts a bit deeper.
Yeah.
Yes, and proceed. Choose the policy format. I like this one. We can choose either a professional document or we can choose a narrative manifesto. And I personally like the narrative manifesto style. So I'm going to ask for the output in this manifesto style. So here is my narrative AI manifesto that I think could be great. There's a lot of women leaders that could put this on their website, their LinkedIn profile. They can include it with their AI resume. So here is our final manifesto. And I'm going to try to bring it back to our bias prompt that we got stuck on earlier. Can you check this output for bias? Okay. I've reviewed your narrative manifesto, focusing on internal assumptions and potential blind spots and overall balance. So I have a strong rating. Unchallenged assumptions is adequate. And again, you can read this. People can read their own output and make their own changes. So it says yours is exceptionally strong in ethical guardrails and demonstrates a proactive commitment to counteracting common biases. Would you like to move on to step 8 to generate the professional document? I'm not going to do that because I think everybody probably already knows what will happen when we do step 8. But so now we've run through an entire workflow. And at each step, the AI asked for your human answers, and you had an opportunity to edit them and co-create the final output. And AI dynamically changed the direction that it went in based on your responses to the last series of questions. So that is why I believe that workflows are super powerful.
I love it. And what a fantastic experience to just expand on that work of creating your AI policy and making sure that you have a say in how you're going to communicate that to people and your clients. Absolutely love that.
Yeah,
Ah, thank you so much. Oh my
my
goodness.
pleasure.
Absolutely love it. Katie, if someone wants to connect with you and they want to talk to you more about this, where are they going to go?
Yeah, there's the two places that I hang out most are on LinkedIn or my email inbox. Find me on LinkedIn, Katie Milton Jordan, and my email address is katie@katiemiltonjordan.com.
I love it. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are all the better for hanging out with you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Michelle.
You've been listening to Empowered by AI, and I'm your host, Michelle Muncy-Silva. If something from this episode clicked, don't let it stop here. Take one idea and try it out this week. And if you want to go deeper, head over to the Empowered by AI, the Slay Effect YouTube channel, where you can watch demos and walkthroughs from our guests today and so many others. Subscribe and join us there so you don't miss out on what's coming next. All the links and resources are in the show notes. I'll see you next time.